Today's dedication is for Terax, who gave me a very generous 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon. Calix versus Negan. Pretty slow start, but I do like the Enchantress to get us into some more cards potentially, so we'll try this one. Turn 2, our opponent plays a Rakdos Signet. Alright, and we draw into a turn 2 drop, that is Fertile Ground. Might as well get the Fertile Ground into play here and ramp a little bit. And now a Coercive Portal in 1v1, haven't seen this in a long time, but in 1v1 our opponent will just draw an additional card every turn. So I think I want to get down the Enchantress's Presence before I start casting my commander and the Parallel Lives. So let's just get down Cavern of Souls, name Human with that, and then play the Enchantress's Presence, ready for cantripping on most of our spells. In Coercive Portal, doesn't really matter what we choose. It's either Homage or it's a draw, so our opponent will draw an additional card, like I said. And then more ramp in Talisman of Conviction, 4 cards left in our opponent's hand. And then Anguished Unmaking went on to our Enchantress spell. So now seeing a Yavimaya. So I think we're fine getting down the Calix here, and we'll hope that our opponent doesn't have any removal. So hopefully we'll be able to hit them next turn. A Runescarred Demon for our opponent, going to allow him to tutor. So could go for an Austere command or something like that there. Alright, so did our opponent go for mass enchantment removal is the question. Draw another land. We could at least keep our commander in place, so yeah, let's go for the Heliod's Pilgrim here and tutor something up. So when Heliod's Pilgrim enters, we can search for, where is it? The Shield of the Oversoul is what we're after, so green creatures get indestructible and white creatures get flying, so let's go for Shield of the Oversoul. And we'll just have to hope that our opponent doesn't have a Farewell in hand. So with that we can put a plus counter on the Calix, which means it can go toe to toe with the Runescarred Demon. So they either block it and lose that, which is fine with me, or they let it through and we get a copy of the Oversoul to make this a flying chump blocker. So now we go through to combat, swing straight in at our opponent for some commander damage here. And they do not decide to block, so holding on to the Runescarred Demon. So copy the Shield of the Oversoul, and that will be attached to the Heliod's Pilgrim, like I said, so +1/+1 and flying there. And then when that enters, we'll start putting plus counters on the Heliod's Pilgrim as well. Our opponent's shocking in a Blood Crypt, so wants the 8 mana available to him now. Ephemerate from our opponent with the Runescarred Demons, so they do get another tutor and they'll get another one during the next turn if they still have the Runescarred Demon in play. And then our opponent plays out a Mana Crypt, allows our opponent into Negan the Cold-Blooded, so now we have to sacrifice a creature. That'll obviously have to be the Heliod's Pilgrim here. Alright, and we chose wrong there, so we do have to sacrifice both creatures. The Calix goes back into the command zone, they get some treasure tokens. 4 cards in hand for our opponent. And now the Monarchy being introduced with a Court of Ire. So they go up to 4 at the end of the turn. Okay, and that's a Rancor for us. So just playing out the commander again, obviously puts a plus counter on itself. If we can land the Umbra Mystic with a Rancor on our commander, then that would be good, but we're a turn away from that, and they are going to get another Runescarred Demon, most likely, thanks to the Ephemerate over here. So Court of Ire is 7 damage to us, because they are the Monarch. Drawing another card to the Coercive Portal. And then Ephemerate does go onto the Runescarred Demons, so another tutor for our opponent. We see Terror of the Peaks now from our opponent, which goes well with the Blink shenanigans. And speaking of which, it is a teleportation circle. So could flicker the Negan and get rid of our commander yet again. Or, I suppose, yeah, might as well get another tutor, what's that, like the 4th or 5th one? And they'll get 6 damage off the Terror of the Peaks onto our Calix, no doubt. Okay, looks like they're pointing the Terror of the Peaks at us. Alright, so we got to survive with the Calix in play at least. I suppose it's a good idea to get down the Umbra Mystic and try and keep our commander in play. I'd like to play the Parallel Lives into the Citizen Champion, really. So let's go Umbra Mystic here. And I don't think our opponent's going to go for a board wipe, so we might as well play the Citizen Champion now, ready for the Parallel Lives next turn, but yeah, for all the cheap auras we've got in this deck, there's over 30 of them. We're not doing too well drawing them, unfortunately. But it's a pretty rough spot against Edict effects, to be honest. 7 damage to us from the Court of Ire again. Sword of Feast and Famine now will be protection from green. And now we see a Tergrid in play, which is obviously really good with Negan getting flickered. The sword goes on to Terror of the Peaks for 7 damage in the air. So our opponent could probably get us here. So we're going to get knocked down to 1 here. We'll have to discard the parallel lives to the sword. And then because we discarded that to the Tergrid, they'll get the parallel lives themselves from the bin. The 1,000,000th tutor from the Runescarred Demon off the back of the Cloud Shift. So Runescarred Demon comes back into play again. And Terror of the Peaks will finish us off with the 6 damage from that entering. And it's a good game to our opponent. We'll see if we can play a game in which our deck actually works now. Calix versus another Aura Commander in Light Pause this time. With no lands in hand, are we destined to do nothing during this video? Okay, that's not bad. We'll put the Bear Umbra away, just because we had to mulligan here. Alright, and we instantly replace with another Aura, so that's really good. Just get a tap land out. Light Pause Emperor's Voice into play on turn 2, as you would typically expect. Okay, and another Aura is really good. This is much like what we would want to have the game play out like. So it's Wolfwillow Haven onto the basic forest, and that will tap for 2 green mana now. I imagine Light Pause is going to outrace us here, because, yeah, when I played Light Pause back on the channel when that first came out, it turned out it's a really, really fast commander. And the fact that you can double up the auras is incredible. So Shield of Duty and Reason, pro green and blue, and then Hyena Umbra gives it first strike and totem armor, so already a 3/3 hitting us for 3 commander damage. It gives us pro creatures though, so let's drop a land. We'll get our Calix into play, puts a plus counter on itself, and then we'll protect it hopefully with a Hyena Umbra. Ideally we could get into hexproof here, but there's every chance that our opponent can deal with our commander in the meantime. We're going to need a couple of turns dodging stuff like that. So the commander now a 6/6 has Daybreak Coronet on there after playing the Benevolent Blessing, so has protection from green twice here. It is pro blue, pro green, first strike, lifelink and vigilance. It is a 6/6, so can't block with the Calix. Alright, excellent. And Alpha Authority is really good, so yeah, it's tempting to get down lead Denetha so that all of our auras will cost 1, but we can just cast 2 here and cast 2 next turn, and it's pretty much the same outcome. So go for Alpha Authority to give our commander hexproof, and then all that glitters on there will be fine as well. And then Spirit Mantle we should probably put on there so that we can actually swing in this turn. So we attack straight through our opponent for 7 points of commander. And then Spirit Mantle's just +1/+1, as is the Totem Armor, so we will make a copy of the Totem Armor here, I think. This way we can dodge some removal twice, hopefully. Although, yeah, the Hyena Umbra Totem Armor only cares about destruction, and we are against white, so exile is a threat. That's why getting into the hexproof was so important there. Just have to pray our opponent doesn't get us here. Alright, a Generous Gift gives us a token. A green token, which is noteworthy, so the Light Pause can still swing straight through it. Luckily, all that glitters is going to help us here. We did just lose out on an enchantment though. If we can get into a land here. Alright, Utopia Sprawl does buff off the all that glitters, so we might as well put that on the Savannah. And it's noteworthy that the Calix, which I didn't realise, the Calix has protection from its own abilities because it has pro creatures, so can't put plus counters on itself anymore. Luckily we can put the All That Glitters over there. So that buffs our commander up to a 15/15. And like I said, we do have protection from creatures. So let's swing in. And it looks like, by some miracle, we've outraced the Light Pause player. Like I said, was really lucky there that we got into the Alpha Authority, because I dare say that the Generous Gift would have gone on that, although the Totem Armor would have fallen off. But yeah, it might have made a difference there. Might not have pushed quite enough damage through with the All That Glitters. We were only 1 above the minimum for the commander damage there. We'll play another one. Calix versus Shurikai this time with, yeah, a little bit of fast mana. We're not going to get out our commander anymore quickly, but yeah, we'll just have to pray that our opponent doesn't go really quick, which Shurikai typically does. Not seeing any fast mana from our opponent, which is good, so we'll get in the tap land. And yeah, I suppose we could go for a Calix next turn, but I think it's a better idea to get Summoning Sickness off our commander. A Liquimetal Torque from our opponent. We'll be able to destroy artifacts with that. Okay, a forest for us makes perfect sense here. Yeah, there's not really much sense in going for the Ancient Tomb when we're just casting our commander. A metal worker into play now, so we'll assume that our opponent has a bunch of artifacts in hand that he's going to reveal with that. Now, if our opponent has destruction for the Calix, it's likely exile in white, which means the Timely Ward doesn't necessarily need to be held up here. Hyena Umbra could be useful as well. Definitely drop the Ancient Tomb. Yeah, maybe just going for as many enchantments as possible here and keeping our fingers crossed, so the Ancestral Mask will try and land commander damage on our opponent as soon as we can. Didn't really think much of the plus counter effect on the Calix, but it does seem to mount up the commander damage. It certainly helped us last game. Played Ancestral Mask here, +2/+2 for each other enchantment in the entire, or on the entire battlefield. So Hyena Umbra will help it if our opponent goes for a board wipe or some destruction magic, could have a disenchant or something. Another plus counter goes on with that. And then we'll get some evasion with the 1 mana Griff's Boon, which does give flying and a +1 buff to power. So we're already up to 14 points of commander damage here, which is exactly how I was hoping the deck was going to run. They're going to need removal or a flyer in the air. So that lands, meaning we can make a copy of an enchantment. I don't think it really matters if we get another Ancestral Mass down, so let's just play it safe and go Hyena Umbra. If our opponent does manage to destroy the Calix, we'll have another Totem Armor for them to try and get through. Well, that's yet another plus counter. Okay, the Metalworker revealing to us an Ether Sworn Canonist. Bit too late for that. A Walking Ballista and a Parhelion II. So, yeah, we've got some mystery cards in hand still against our opponent. They've tapped down their white mana for that, so getting into exile won't necessarily be possible. And any Pongify rapid hybridization effects are protected thanks to the Hyena Umbra, so it's looking pretty promising here. Could bounce our commander. Suppose they could go for blowing up the Griff's Boon somehow, getting rid of the Griff's Boon, and so we don't have a means of flying. So if they're looking to do that here, we'll go for a land, and we'll get the Angelic Gift into play, so that we've got multiple means of flying. Could be a mistake if they do manage to bounce it with an unsummon effect, because it means that we lose the Angelic Gift here. Angelic Gift does cantrip when it enters. Alright, excellent, and we draw into Bear Umbra as well. So, assuming that we're allowed to go through to attack, so I'm just trying to play it really safe here. We'll go for a land, go for Bear Umbra, just so that we untap the lands when we attack. I mean, they shouldn't allow us to attack if they can do something about our commander here. But allows us through to attack, so we'll at least untap all of our lands here. Alright, get our opponent down to 0 and 40 commander damage, so that was another pretty quick one. I think I'll try and shoehorn in another game. Calix versus Zamon and Dina. I'll have released the multiplayer game in which that deck went very well for me by the time you're seeing this, and I'm intrigued to see how it does in 1v1. Just a bayou from our opponent, we draw into another land, so ramp on turn 1 with this Wild Growth. And now I Growth Spiral, and our opponent does get into the Dimir Aqueduct, which they do not bounce. The way I used this in Zamon and Dina was I bounce this one land over and over again in order to trigger it multiple times, but they're nowhere near the 8 lands that they need for that. Alright, a Sol Ring. So do we want to play Sylvan Library or our commander here? We'll need a white mana for our commander. I think we best get the Summoning Sickness away from that as soon as possible. Might as well play the only artifact in the deck in Sol Ring to ramp ourselves ahead here. And once again we do have the All That Glitters. Unquestioned Authority is again protection from creatures, but we now know that we can't get the plus counters on Calix, and those can be very useful, so we'll have to be careful. A Scoot Swarm from our opponent, and dropping a land into that will make a token. So I think going for the Unquestioned Authority would be a good idea in that case. Sigil of the Empty Throne is tempting, but we don't have double white anyway, so yeah, I think that just means that it's Sylvan Library to actually try and get into lands that we need, which will be considered an enchantment of course, so another plus counter on our commander. And then let's just go for the All That Glitters, and we'll hope that our opponent doesn't have any removal for the Calix. Only 3 cards in hand at the moment, but our commander is already a 10-10. So yeah, I'd be tempted to go for swords onto the Scoot Swarm, but we'll make them just chump block with an insect token here. If they feel as though they're secure behind a wall of insects, then we might be able to just pile on and one-shot them next turn, depending on what we get into off the Sylvan Library, of course. And we'll take a damage from the Scoot Swarm. Okay, and holding up all that mana is worrisome, so we'll see what we get into here before we make any decisions, but we might need to go for some counter magic fodder. Alright, a Kenrith's Transformation, Mirari's Wake is tempting as well, so let's just keep all these anyway, because we need to keep hitting lands, and we're still not into double white. So let's try a Mirari's Wake, see if we can get through some counter magic here. If not, then we've got double mana. Alright, there we go, and it was a mana drain of all the spells, so they get an extra 5 mana next turn. Doesn't help them with their commander at least, but yeah, let's go for digging down a little bit further into our library. We'll get rid of that Scoot Swarm. It'll stop making chump blockers for them at least. Kenrith will draw us a card, Kenrith's Transformation, another plus counter on the Calix. It's even more green mana for us, so swing in and have the insect token block. So now it's 5 colourless mana off the back of the mana drain, countering the Mirari's Wake. We see a cold Selkie, or a cold-eyed Selkie, a mystical tutor as well, which is an abrupt decay, no doubt to go on the All That Glitters. Right, let's see how much damage we can do here. Sun Titan isn't really what we want to see, although if they blow up the All That Glitters, then I suppose they'd go after the Calix more than the All That Glitters, wouldn't they? We can grab stuff back with Sun Titan regardless, once we finally get into double white. Alright, there's a white source for us, so yeah, again we'll just keep all these. Our opponent's not really dealing damage to us. So it's double white off the Django. Play ourselves a Sanctum Weaver. Plus counter on our commander, we'll make it a 14-14. Then it'll be a 16-16 from the Unquestioned Authority. So maybe we just go for the Sigil here, because Abrupt Decay is going to blow up our commander anyway. And again, we're just encouraging our opponent to block ultimately. And they'll probably just block with the Scoot Swarm. 0 cards in hand, but we know what they're drawing into, so yeah, we're going to go a bit slower this game, but I do fancy our odds unless our opponent gets some really good top decks. We do lose the enchantment in Kenrith's Transformation, so that will be a slight debuff on our Calix, now a 15-15. So as we thought, Abrupt Decay onto our commander, we'll have it put into the command zone, and they decide to try and get through with Island Walk. We know that they don't have anything else in hand, so there's no danger in blocking here. They might as well try their luck in swinging. Alright, a Satyr Enchanter, still wanting white mana, because we might want to go for Sun Titan onto the All That Glitters and Unquestioned Authority next turn. Well, unfortunately our opponent seems to be timing out here. I'll carry on and hope that we draw some cards off the Sylvan Library, but not entirely sure what we're going to do. Alright, there's a Shram, Hallowed Haunting. Maybe we can just take a setup turn in this case. Amazed at the number of lands that we're not getting into. Yeah, Shram and Satyr Enchanter are probably a good idea for the one aura that we've got in play, or in our hand. Although we do have white mana off the Sanctum Weaver as well, don't we? So anyway, let's go for the Shram and the Satyr Enchanter. And I'm not sure how much white mana we get from this thing. Okay, that's 4 white mana. So we can play ourselves a Calix. And that counts as an enchantment, of course, so we get an Angel. And Satyr Enchanter will draw us a card, so we don't have to put as much life into the Sylvan Library at this point. Archon of Sun's Grace is really nice as well. Yeah, with that having lifelink and giving creatures lifelink, it might be worth getting that down here. Yes, I think I will get that down here as opposed to any other enchantments. Our opponent's still in top deck mode, of course, so could get into, it looks like a pretty spiky deck, so could get into tutors, into wraths and things like that. Instead it is an E-Witness, so they go after the Growth Spiral, simply to draw another card. Yeah, they needed the double green, so they couldn't go for Abrupt Decay there, and I don't suppose that would help them anyway. So playing Growth Spiral to draw a card. Okay, so we're in a pretty commanding position here. I think Sylvan Library might put more life into if we're going to gain life from the Pegasus here. Alright, so more Enchantresses. We're probably fine to just draw into those, in all honesty. It's fun. We'll just put the life into it. If we lose to putting too much life into Sylvan Library, then so be it. So Reliquary Tower, we can still tap the Ancient Tomb for green mana. We can gain life with Swords to Plowshares as well if we feel as though that's important. So let's play ourselves an Argothian Enchantress first of all. Want to draw a few more cards. Try and actually get into some auras. Play the Hallowed Haunting after that, which will make spirits for us. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We do control enough creatures to give them all flying and vigilance. So if we can get into a lifelink enchantment, that would be really good. Finally getting into some white mana. And it's a plus counter on... I'll put it on the Archon simply because it's got lifelink. Makes a 2/2 lifelinker as well. And we're of course making angels also. Tap the Sanctum down for a bunch of white mana. I'll carefully tap this down for green. And we can play ourselves a Sun Titan. Sun Titan goes on the All That Glitters this time, and we'll put that on the Calix so that we can start threatening commander damage. That jumps up to an 11/11 straight away. Can put a plus counter on itself while we don't have Unquestioned Authority. I think it's time to actually play the Unquestioned Authority though, we've been holding on to it all game. So that triggers a bunch. The Shram cantrips us, get an Angel token, get a Spirit token, draw with the 2 Enchantresses. And yeah, our opponent decides to scoop at that. The plus counter from Calix would have gone onto the Archon for more life gain. Make another Pegasus, draw a card to the Unquestioned Authority. Would have been a Grafted Growth. I think with the floating mana I would have gone for Swords onto the Cold-Eyed Selkie. They might have been able to buff this enough to kill us and somehow give us an island. Blue does have means of enchanting your lands to make them islands. But yeah, that turned out to be pretty convincing in the end. Hopefully you all enjoyed this visit to the new Calix. Huge thank you to the patrons for supporting the channel so consistently. I probably would have given up on this channel a long time ago if it wasn't for you. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.